What's up? It's Ben Shepherd here and welcome back to RunThrough TV. Okay, today's conversation is with Freya Morgan. You might know Freya by a different name though, the Human Disco Ball. She's at loads of our events in the south, warming you up for your races, and she's incredible. You'll hear all about why she wears that costume in this conversation, her mental health struggles over the years, and her fundraising journey that she's on right now, and why she loves running so much. So without further ado, let's get into this conversation with Freya Morgan.
Sure. I'm Freya. I'm an amateur runner. I've been running since I was 16, and at the moment I'm running 2,500 kilometres to try and raise £120,000 for an emergency solidarity fund for refugees and asylum seekers. And I'm doing it all dressed as a disco ball.
I think the best place to start is why, and kind of how did this pop into your head, this idea?
So why the disco ball?
Well, why everything? Why did you decide you wanted to do this challenge? Why did you decide that when you decided you wanted to do the challenge, you wanted to do it in the disco ball outfit? Just why?
Why? Great question. So I have a history of struggling with my mental health, and it's something that I take pride in having worked really hard on and worked with every resource available to me to conquer. And running was a huge part of that. It was there right at the beginning, the first time I was severely depressed, and it continues to be there for me every time life is hard. So I knew that there was a connection between running and my mental health, and running and being able to make a difference. And I've seen so many runners do it. I've seen the money they raise and the impact they have on their community. Like Pete Cooper and his Refugee Run Club is a classic example of what you can do with running. So for me, it's one of the most powerful things you can do to make a difference and to look after yourself. And I'd done a campaign before for the Samaritans, who are really close to my heart. I've worked in suicide support now for 3 or 4 years, and I wanted to raise money for them. So I decided I was going to do 10 marathons by the time I turned 25 and raised a few grand for them. And was always thinking, as runners often do, or what's the next challenge going to be? You know, I've done a marathon now. And that was always there. I was always in my mind like, oh, should I go do the Marathon des Sables? Should I go run around the Sahara Desert? But I also knew, because I'm qualifying in law and I work in human rights, and that's always going to be where I want to put my time, what I think is a good use of my time, that if I was going to do anything else, it was going to be to help refugees and asylum seekers. I've seen what's happening. I think we've all seen what's happening. The world is a very scary place right now, but particularly for them, particularly for the journey they go on to get to safety, and then the journey they go on when they get somewhere where they think that they might be safe. So I read this report from the Independent Monitoring Board about Brookhouse Detention Centre, and it reported that 1/3 of people in the centre at the time that they had conducted their review were on suicide watch. And that number blew my mind. I was like, if you think about that, 1/3, imagine being in a room of people, you know, everyone at work, everyone you know who lives on your street, and 1 in every 3 people is so desperate and struggling so much that they are self-harming and that they're planning to end their life. And I just couldn't get my head around it. So I was like, well, this is aligned perfectly. I knew about the Nationality and Borders Act. I knew there were things happening in law, and I was like, I think the timing of this is meant to be. So I went to Charity Bail for Immigration Detainees, who do the most amazing work in this area. They work directly with people as caseworkers and provide that legal service. And they help them often when no one else can and can reach them. And I said, what do you need? You tell me what you need and I will help you make it happen. Because there's got to be something you need, I sense. Yes. And they said, if we can have another legal manager, the number of people we can reach at this very difficult time in policy will be completely changed. So 120k will pay for that post. So I said, okay, I guess we're raising 120k. And it's become the Emergency Solidarity Fund, because what is happening needs means that people need solidarity. They need that feeling that a community is behind them and supporting them as a refugee, as asylum seeker, as an immigrant in this country, just to know that they haven't been left and that they're not alone and that they do belong here. So we officially started at Christmas. And by June, hopefully, we'll have reached £120,000 for bail for immigration detainees. But it's been a long journey, and trying to run 2,500 kilometres along the way as well.
What was their reaction then when you said to them, well, look, I'm going to put myself out there here and try and raise that money so you can get that member of staff that you so desperately need?
Well, I think at the time, I'm a doer. So I just think I just need to I need to pitch it and they'll say yes or no, and then I need to get on with it. So at the time I just pitched it and I was like, great, they've said yes. But then on reflection, hearing Annie, the director, and Elisa, who's their fundraising manager, they were like, we were just in this meeting and we were just blown away. We got this random email on a Monday morning from Aaron and Freya being like, we want to raise all this money for you. And then we met with them and they'd done all this work and they knew what they were talking about. And they still talk about it like, they're like, fundraising is hard. Getting a message out there is hard. And we just had 2 people be like, we'll just do it. We'll just do it for you. So looking back, I think they were a bit stunned, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because understandably, not everyone's got the time to just finding the energy and the time to do that amount of work for charity without being paid. Because Aaron and I just do this for the love of it, for the care of it. It rarely happens. So I think they were amazed, to be honest.
I mean, it's obviously such a polarizing topic right now, but for you doing this at the moment, it must in some ways feel like a privilege because you're out there running the miles, raising the money for people that don't get the opportunity to do things like this. Do you feel quite privileged to be doing this and kind of raising awareness for such an important cause?
I think I feel privileged that so many communities have welcomed me in and given me the chance to speak and have listened, because it's a really stressful topic. And I think lots of people are scared of the issue, and listening in the first place is hard. So every time I've gone to a sports event or a running event or a charity event and people have listened, I feel privileged and lucky that they've given me their time. And I feel privileged to do this on behalf of BID, Bail for Immigration Detainees, who I can't put into words the respect I feel for them doing this work, and other charities in that area like RunThrough and Detention Action. And I think I feel privileged to be able to do it, just to be able to run and to be in a position as someone who is studying in this area and works in human rights. I understand it a bit more, maybe, to be in the position to share that message and to be physically able to run the distance. And I mean, to be honest, most days I just feel lucky to be alive anyway, because my own experience in life means that, I was suicidal. I did try to kill myself twice. And so the idea of still being here and doing something important, that's what matters. So I feel hugely lucky to be able to do this.
And how important are those charities?
I can't put into words, really. It's not a case of them being more important than another charity. Like when I think about them and I think about the Samaritans, I don't think of that one as more important than the other. I think they serve different people who are going through different experiences. But within that world right now, when you have a piece of legislation coming through that sadly disapplies all human rights, which is really unusual, and effectively says that the people who are captured under this bit of law don't have the right to liberty and security. They don't have those human right protections. Victims of human trafficking, children can be put in detention centres. They're not viewed as the same as you and me. They're viewed as a lesser person under this bit of legislation. And they're human beings who have been on a journey to find safety. You don't get into one of those boats as a first choice. That is a last resort option. And what BID do is they are often that lifeline. When you think, it's a legal service, but it's detention centres are very invisible. And if you think, like if I asked you, I was like, could you name a detention centre in the UK?
No.
They're far from our view, and there's thousands of people in there living in these conditions. And for them, bail for immigration detainees are often the only people who can reach them. They're the only person they have contact from the outside world who gives them any indication that someone is fighting for them. And when you think about what they're going through right now, imagine what that one person would mean to you.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
they do a very unique thing. And alongside a number of other phenomenal charities, I think make those people feel like someone cares.
I want to touch on your running journey a little bit as well, because obviously we've spoken about your battles with your mental health and how running has helped you through that. Do you remember when you first found running as kind of like, well, what it is, a relief, kind of an ease to some sort of those mental pressures? Do you remember when it first became kind of a pivotal point and a pivotal part of your life?
I remember exactly when it was, because it was the New Year's resolution.
Okay, yes, one that stuck.
Yeah, I know, rare, isn't it? No, so in the November before, so this was the 1st of January 2012, and the November before was the first time I'd attempted to kill myself. And I don't know if anyone hearing this will have been through this experience. It is, to survive a suicide attempt is a very surreal life experience. And I think for everyone it's a bit different, but you have a period of time afterwards where you weren't expecting to be there. And I remember life was still terrible in my eyes, you know, things were still impossible. And I had nothing really to take forward. I had nothing to live for effectively. And my dad was someone who used to be in the army, and he was big into fitness, he was big into running. And I always, as a 16-year-old, I remember being like, oh, you go on and on about this, and running does not solve the problem. You know, when someone's like, have you tried breathing? And you're like, oh yeah, I've tried breathing. And he kept saying he thought exercise and running would help me. And I thought, classic teenager, it's like, sport is not going to fix this problem. But on the 1st of January, I thought, look, I'm still here. I'm here for now anyway, and I'm miserable, I'm in pain. And so why don't I just do this thing? Because it's going to be miserable anyway. So I'll be miserable or I'll be miserable. And I kind of did it to prove a point to him that running wouldn't solve the problem. And here we are 11 years later. And I think he might have proven his point. So I started running, and I did a Catch to 5K plan, and I couldn't run for more than maybe 40 seconds, 50 seconds. I didn't do any sport at the time. And I remember like marching around these fields in January, you know, that awful sideways January rain, and you're in the mud and it's bleak. And I was like marching around these fields out of breath, just like, I hate running and I hate the world. And looking back, it's almost funny, really. But I finished the plan. I tried to quit twice, but I finished the plan. And at the end of it, I was like, oh, I can run for 35 minutes without stopping. I only did it twice, but I was like, I can do it. And then I remember I did my first 10K at Easter. And then that summer was running like 50, 60 kilometers a week. I was doing a half marathon every single weekend. And life was still difficult. You know, everything that was going on in my life, it was still hard. But I had this thing that was just for me. And I remember that summer, there was one run I did, and it was this amazing weather. And you know, when you go off for a run in the countryside and you don't have to be back for anything, you're not rushing for anything, you haven't got your headphones in, it's just complete silence. And I was running down this country road in this gorgeous weather, and I was like, oh, I have something that I can do that's just mine, that no one can take away from me. And actually, I'm quite good at it. And it gives me the smallest sense of peace. So I knew that running was going to be in my life for a really long time. And then obviously you get the bug and you're like, well, now I need to do a half marathon. Now I need to do a marathon. Now I need to do all these races. And it's definitely a thing about RunThrough as well. That's how they get you with the medals.
How special are those little moments? Because they're not always at the end of a race. I think sometimes people think, you know, as a runner, talking to people that maybe aren't runners, they think that it's just those moments at the end of the races when you get that medal that means so much, and guaranteed they are big moments. But there are also those moments, like you said, on a Sunday when you've got nothing else to do, you're in the middle of nowhere, you've got no phone signal, and suddenly the sun hits you in a certain way and you feel amazing. Those moments are like so special, aren't they?
So special. And I think rare sometimes in life, when you've got a busy life, or you're dealing with hard things in life, those little moments are the ones that make everything else worthwhile. And for me, I'm just a complete workaholic. And ever since I effectively decided, sounds bleak to put it this way, but ever since I effectively decided not to be dead and to stay and to try and do something and make a difference, life has been very busy in a good way. And I've always worked crazy hours. And for me, running has been the one thing I can always do with myself to ground myself and to reset a bit. And it's been something I can do on my own. But then on the flip side, you go and do races and you meet people you would never meet. Yeah. I would never have crossed paths with some of these people, and I'm so grateful that I have. And I've done a couple of marathons where I was really struggling. I'm thinking of one in particular. I was doing the Tromsø Marathon in Norway, and I got to the 14-mile point, and I maybe hadn't done quite as much training as I should have done.
One of those.
One of those, but it was beautiful, so it didn't matter. And I hit the 14-mile mark and I was like, oh, I'm really starting to struggle. I'm just going to pick someone and I'm just going to start talking to them. Whoever is the next person around the corner is the person I'm going to talk to. And I ran up to this person and he just happened to be English and speak English. He's called Martin, and we are still friends. And we ran the next 10 miles together. And this is in the middle of the night, in the midnight sun. And we told each other our life stories. And I remember him telling me how he'd had this friend who he was really worried about and he'd looked after, and, you know, his life in Nottingham and just everything, like his involvement with the local football club and all the charity and fundraising work he did, even like the local dog shelter and the fact he goes and he visits all the dogs and he gives them all his money, and he has this huge heart. And we had this whole chat and I remember all these little details, and to this day, every single time I put something up about running or charity stuff online, we always end up having little conversations, and I never would have known him if we hadn't had that conversation, and I will never forget it either.
And I feel like sometimes those moments are supposed to happen. Like in that race, maybe you weren't supposed to do quite as much training, because if you had done loads of training and you were 100% tip top and ready to go, you would never have met him. And it's kind of weird, those things that kind of happen and those connections that happen. On the outset, on the sort of outside as well, running is, people perceive it as like this individual feat. And in some ways it can be, but it is more like a team sport than people realise sometimes, I think, because there is that huge sense of community, and community in life and community when it comes to mental health as well, I think is so important. Is that something that you kind of feel and see as well?
Yeah, it's the reason I kept coming back, really, because I think like a lot of people, running has been love-hate, and I've definitely had times where thought I'd maybe take up taekwondo or something instead. But it's the people. And I think the thing I've always noticed, every run club I've ever joined, when I did sport at uni, every time I've got involved with races and park runs and things like that, is that runners endlessly give up their time. Have you noticed this?
Yeah, like, all the time.
Without thinking about it. You don't have trainers, you can wear the trainers they're wearing. Like, you need someone to pace you, they'll run the entire thing with you. It doesn't matter what they were planning to do, they'll help you. And just random strangers you've never met standing on a finish line being like, that was the best thing you've ever done, I'm so proud of you. And you're like, I don't know these people from anyone, and yet they're turning up for me. And so it is addictive, because you remind yourself what community means, and the running community is huge. And I think one of the things with this campaign is I was like, it is a very difficult topic, but I know as a runner that if I turn up and I'm like, I'm just trying to do something that's going to help, I knew they'd at least listen to that. So as a community, they've been amazing. They've always been amazing, and then they've been amazing for this as well.
What do you think that is? What do you think people do that for? Because I've done it. Like I ran a 10K the other day and helped somebody around the last 3K. But I've done it, and I've also been the person that's needed it. But I never really think about doing it, and I'm sure you've done it and been the person as well. What is that? Why do we, I guess, why do the running community do it?
I think there's that thing, isn't there, where you don't know if you can do it till you do it. And running really is about self-belief. And then each time you achieve something, you're like, oh my God, I really can do this. And you get confidence like nothing else. And I think when you see someone at the start of their running journey and you're like, I know you can do this. And all they need is someone to be that voice until they've done it. And then they can do it for someone else. It's like passing it on, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think particularly when it comes to people who are maybe a bit shyer, it's like their first race they've come to, or they're like, oh no, I don't run that fast, or I don't know if I'm going to be able to do the whole 10K. Being able to be there for them is what's going to get them across the finish line. And I think it then filters out into the rest of life, and you get that sense that community really is the biggest motivating factor. I don't know about for you, but I've realised that it's probably my most important value, like integrity and community. And so every time someone does something for me, helps me out, I can think of like 3 or 4 people at RunThrough who help me out every single week. I think, oh, I need to do that at least twice for someone else, just because that's how it works. You pass it on. Yeah. So long may that wonderful spirit of the running community live.
It's that paying it forward thing as well. And I mean, selfishly too, and you don't do this because it feels like this, but when you help somebody cross a line, or when you help somebody get a time, or when you see somebody struggling and then help them finish the race, it almost feels like you get that same feeling as if you're breaking a PB, or if you're finishing a race that you've like targeted as your A goal. You get that, don't you?
Seeing my friends cross the finish line is more exciting than me ever crossing the finish line.
I know.
I like I took my friend last January to do her first ever park run, and she also struggles with asthma, and she was like, oh, go ahead, you're really fast, go ahead. I'm just gonna I'll walk it and I'll finish it. And we ran the whole thing. We had 2 walk breaks up hills, and we ran the whole thing. And I remember she finished it and she was just like, oh my God, I did it. And I was like, the whole day I was completely buzzing off the fact. I was like, yeah, you did do it. And everyone else turns up and does their park run on Saturday morning, and you could see them around her, and then they were getting the bug because she was like, I did it. And they were like, yeah, you did do it. And it's so infectious. It's so infectious. And I love it when my friends are like, I try not to bully people into running. I'm like, you have to come to it in your own time. I'm not trying to convince you. And
however,
it's not for everyone. But I'll get you in the end. Yeah, so they often are sort of like, oh, I've been thinking about it, but, I don't think I'm a runner. And as soon as they say that, I'm like, oh, there's this 5K we could go and do. And seeing them finish and cross the finish line. I ran a half marathon with my best friend 5 years ago, and I ran the whole thing with her. And I could hear when she got to the last mile, I could hear how emotional it was for her, and I could hear how happy she was. And it was the Glasgow half, and that last sort of quarter half mile is just rammed with people. And then she was getting emotional, and I was getting emotional. And I always think about that when I'm having a bad day. I think about running with her. I ran a marathon, and it was my sister's first and only marathon. She's now injured, and she doesn't know if she's going to be able to run again. And it was something she had always wanted to do. And then she ended up accidentally running it really fast. Like, I was pegging it to keep up with her the whole time. And she was like 7th in her age category or something.
Amazing.
Crazy. And just getting to be part of that person crossing the finish line and be part of the story. Like, those are memories I'm never going to forget.
We need to touch on this disco ball costume. Why? And every time I see you in it, every time you see you at a race, I just constantly think, that's got to be so hot.
It's not the best running material, I'm going to be honest with you. It's like a dance costume, sort of, I think. maybe. I ordered it online. And so
Okay.
I made the whole thing by ordering mirror glass and buying leotards and things. And I'm looking at it now. It's on my balcony and it's in pieces from the Hampton Court half. And I think this one's at the end of the road, so I'm going to need to build another one tomorrow. But it's not the most breathable material. And unfortunately, we're hitting the distances now where it's also chafing material.
Oh yes, I was imagining that was probably the fact.
So I'm trying to rework it. I'm trying to get creative with a new version, a summer-friendly version of the running outfit. But it does need to be covered in mirror glass, no matter what. That's my condition to this costume.
I think as well that it is definitely something, and I presume this is one of the reasons for it. It definitely, I mean, it helps you stand out, number one, and that helping you stand out also then helps raise more kind of, what's the word? Just helps raise more awareness for what you're doing, because people will ask the question, is that kind of why it's there?
Yeah, I think it's a few things. I think, first of all, it's a disco ball. So people go, what are you doing? Like my friend Dan is a Spider-Man who goes to every run. I don't know if you've seen him.
Yeah, I've seen Dan loads.
Yeah. And everyone's like, oh, look, it's Spider-Man. And look at the disco ball. And it is fun.
The most photographed man, I think, in you and him probably.
He's incredible. He really inspires me as a person. But when you're standing there in a disco costume, people are like, that's so cool. And then they want photos and then you get to talk to them. And I think that's a really important thing with a topic like this is people are really wary. And so giving them the chance to ask questions is really important and making it feel a bit more approachable. But also it's hopeful. Like it makes people smile going along and doing the disco warm-ups. And it's really cheesy. And I'm always saying really cheesy things. I think it brings out a side of people that actually they really like. And they're always laughing. And this is a difficult topic, and when you bring something that makes people feel a bit human and like they can laugh and they can be there together, it just makes it a little bit easier for people to engage as well. So it's a bit of a message of hope, and I don't mean that as in I am the message of hope, like that sounds very cocky, but I think it's important to remember there is hope. There are things that people can do, and something about a disco ball has that effect, I think.